We continue Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Arthur Hugh Clough, by starting Galba. Hippocrates, the Athenian, used to say that it is best to have a mercenary soldier fond of money and of pleasures, for thus he will fight the more boldly to procure the means to gratify his desires. But most have been of opinion that the body of an army, as well as the natural one, when in its healthy condition, should make no efforts apart, but in compliance with its head. Wherefore, they tell us that Paulus Aemilius, on taking command of the forces in Macedonia, and finding them talkative and impertinently busy, as though they were all commanders, issued out his orders, and they should have only ready hands and keen swords, and leave the rest to him. And Plato, who can discern no use of a good ruler or general, if his men are not on their part obedient and conformable, the virtue of obeying as of ruling being in his opinion one that does not exist without first a noble nature and then a philosophic education, where the eager and active powers are allied with the gentler and humaner sentiments, may claim in confirmation of his doctrine sundry mournful instances elsewhere, and in particular the events that followed among the Romans upon the death of Nero, in which plain proofs were given that nothing's more terrible than a military force moving about in an empire upon uninstructed and unreasoning impulses. Demades, after the death of Alexander, compared the Macedonian army to the Cyclops after his eye was out, seizing their many disorderly and unsteady motions. But the calamities of the Roman government might be likened to the motions of the giants that assailed heaven, convulsed as it was, and distracted, and from every side recoiling as it were upon itself, not so much by the ambition of those who were proclaimed emperors, as by the covetousness and license of the soldiery, who drove commander after commander out, like nails upon one another. Dionysius in raillery said of the Pheraon, who enjoyed the government of Thessaly only 10 months, that he had been a tragedy king, but of the Caesar's house in Rome, the Palatium received in a shorter space of time no less than 4 emperors, passing as it were across the stage, and one making room for another to enter. This was the only satisfaction of the distressed, that they need not require any other justice on their oppressors, seeing them thus murder each other. And first of all, that most justly, the one that ensnared them first, and taught them to expect such happy results from a change of emperors, sullying a good word by the pay he gave for its being done, and turning revolt against Nero into nothing better than treason. For, as already related, Nymphidius Sabinius, captain of the guards, together with Tigellinus, after Nero's circumstances were now desperate, and it was perceived that he designed to fly into Egypt, persuaded the troops to declare Galba emperor, as if Nero had been already gone, promising to all the court and praetorian soldiers, as they are called, 7,500 drachmas apiece, and to those in service abroad 1,250 drachmas each. So vast a sum for a largesse as it was impossible anyone could raise, but he must be infinitely more exacting and oppressive than ever Nero was. This quickly brought Nero to his grave, and soon after Galba too, they murdered the first in expectation of the promised gift, and not long after the other because they did not obtain it from him, and then seeking about to find someone who would purchase at such a rate, they consumed themselves in a succession of treacheries and rebellions before they obtained their demands. But to give a particular relation of all that passed would require history in full form, and I have only to notice what is properly to my purpose, namely, what the Caesars did and suffered. In English we're going to say Caesars, but in Latin we have Ca and SARS. So, no Z and C's are pronounced as a K, always. I mean, when there's an H, it's K, but, Sulpicius Galba is owned by all to have been the richest private person that ever came to the imperial seat, and besides the additional honor of being the Servii, he valued himself more especially for his relationship to Catullus, the most eminent citizen of his time, both for virtue and renown. However he may have voluntarily yielded to others in regards power and authority, Galba was also akin to Livia, the wife of Augustus, by whose interest he was referred to the consulship by the emperor. It is said of him that he commanded the troops well in Germany, and being made proconsul in Libya, gained a reputation that few ever had. But his quiet manner of living and his sparingness in expenses and his disregard of appearances gave him, when he became emperor, an ill name for meanness, being in fact his worn-out credit for regularity and moderation. He was entrusted by Nero with the government of Spain, before Nero had yet learned to be apprehensive of men of great repute, to the opinion, moreover, entertained of his mild nature, his mild natural temperature, his old age added a belief that he would never act incautiously. There, while Nero's iniquitous agents savagely and cruelly harassed the provinces under Nero's authority, he could afford no succor, but merely offer this only ease and consolation, that he seemed plainly to sympathize as a fellow sufferer with those who were condemned upon suits and sold, and when lampoons were made upon Nero and circulated and sung everywhere about, he neither prohibited them nor showed any indignation on behalf of the emperor's agents, and for this he was the more beloved, as also that he was now well acquainted with them, having been in chief power there 8 years at the time when Junius Vindex, general of the forces in Gaul, began his insurrection against Nero. So Junius the Victor, because we have that Vindex title, the Order of Nine Angles, so that's an application of it, but that's not what's being referred to in the ONA. And it is reported that letters came to Galba before it fully broke out into an open rebellion, which he neither seemed to give credit to, nor, on the other hand, to take means to let Nero know, as other officers did, sending to him the letters which came to them, and so spoiled the designs as much as in them lay, who yet afterwards shared in the conspiracy, and confessed that they had been treacherous to themselves as well as him. At last Vindex, plainly declaring war, wrote to Galba, encouraging him to take the government upon him and give a head to this strong body, the Gaulish provinces, which could already count 100,000 men in arms, and were able to arm a yet greater number if occasion were. Galba laid the matter before his friends, some of whom thought it fit to wait and see what movement there might be and what inclinations displayed at Rome for the revolution. But Titus Vinius, captain of his Praetorian Guard, spoke thus: Galba, what means this inquiry? To question whether we shall continue faithful to Nero is, in itself, to cease to be faithful. Nero is our enemy, and we must by no means decline the help of Vindex, or else we must at once denounce him and march to attack him, because he wishes you to be the governor of the Romans, or rather than Nero, their tyrant. Thereupon Galba, by an edict, appointed a day when he would receive manumissions and general and general rumor and talk beforehand about his purpose brought together a great crowd of men so ready for a change that he scarcely appeared stepping up to the tribunal, but they, with one consent, saluted him emperor. That title he refused at present to take upon him, but after he had a while inveighed against Nero, and bemoaned the loss of the more conspicuous of those that had been destroyed by him, he offered himself and service to his country, not by the titles of Caesar or emperor, but as the lieutenant of the Roman Senate and people. Now that Vindex did wisely in inviting Galba to the empire, Nero himself bore testimony, who, though he seemed to despise Vindex altogether, disliked the Gauls and their concerns, yet when he heard of Galba, as by chance he had just bathed and sat down to his morning meal, at this news he overturned the table, but the Senate having voted Galba an enemy, presently to make his jest, and likewise to personate a confidence among his friends. This is a very happy opportunity, he said, for me, who sadly want such a booty as that of the Gauls, which must all fall in as lawful prize, and Galba's estate I can use or sell at once, he being now an open enemy, and accordingly he had Galba's property exposed to sale, which, when Galba heard of, he sequestered all that was Nero's in Spain, and found far readier bidders. Many now began to revolt from Nero. Pretty nearly all adhered to Galba. Only Claudius Macer in Africa, and Verginius Rufus, commander of the German forces in Gaul, followed counsel of their own, and yet these two were not of one and the same advice. For Claudius, being sensible of the rapines and murders to which he had been led by cruelty and covetousness, was in perplexity, and felt it was not safe for him either to retain or quit his command. But Verginius, who had the command of the strongest legions, by whom he was many repeated times saluted emperor and pressed to take the title upon him, declared that he neither would assume that honor himself, nor see it given to any other than whom the Senate should elect. These things, at first, did not a little disturb Galba, but when presently Virginius and Vindex were in a manner forced by their armies, having got the reins, as it were, out of their hands, to a great encounter and battle, in which Vindex, having seen 20,000 of the Gauls destroyed, died by his own hand, and when the report straight spread abroad that all desired Verginius, after this great victory, to take the empire upon him, or else they were returned to Nero again, Galba, in great alarm at this, wrote to Virginius, exhorting him to join with him for the preservation of the empire and the liberty of the Romans, and so retiring with his friends into Clania, a town in Spain, he passed away his time, rather repenting his former rashness, and wishing for his wonted ease and privacy, than setting about what was fit to be done. And yeah, so those stories and whatnot of these leaders that, like, oh, dishonor, I've lost, and they kill themselves. There's obviously some of that's true. Well, I mean, the stereotype that they put on movies and stuff like that, but it was now summer, when, on a sudden, a little before dusk, comes a freedman, Icelus by name, having arrived in 7 days from Rome, and being informed where Galba was reposing himself in private, he went straight on, and pushing by the servants of the chamber, opened the door and entered the room, and told him that Nero being yet alive, but not appearing, first the army and then the people and senate declared Galba emperor, Not long after, it was reported that Nero was dead, but I, said he, not giving credit to the common fame, went myself to the body and saw him laying dead, and only then set out to bring you word. This news at once made Galba great again, and a crowd of people came hastening to the door, all very confident of the truth of his tidings, though the speed of the man was almost incredible. 2 days after came Titus Venius with sundry others from the camp, who gave an account in detail of the orders of the Senate, and for this service was considerably advanced. On the freedmen, Galba conferred the honor of the gold ring, and Icelus, as he had been before, now taking the name of Archianus, held the first place of freedmen. But at Rome, Nymphidius Sabinus, not gently and little by little, but at once and without exception, engrossed all power to himself. Galba, being an old man, 73 years of age, was scarcely, he thought, live long enough to be carried in a letter to Rome, and the troops in the city were from old time attached to him, and now bound by the vastness of the promised gift, for which they regarded him as their benefactor, and Galba as their debtor. Thus, presuming on his interest, he straightway commanded Ticelinas, who was in joint commission with himself, to lay down his sword and give entertainments. He invited the former consuls and commanders, making use of Galba's name for the invitation, but at the same time prepared many in the camp to propose a request should be sent to Galba that he should appoint Nymphidius sole prefect for life without a colleague, and the modes which the Senate took to show him honor and increase his power, styling him their benefactor, and attending daily at his gates, and giving him the compliment of heading with his own name and confirming all their acts, carried him to a yet greater degree of arrogance, so that in a short time he became an object not only of dislike but of terror to those that sought his favor. When the consuls themselves had dispatched their couriers with the decrees of the Senate to the emperor, together with the sealed diplomas which the authorities in all the towns where the horses or carriages are changed look at, and on that certificate hasten the courtiers forward with all their means, he was highly displeased that his zeal had not been used, and none of his soldiers employed on the errand. Nay, he even deliberated what course to take with the consuls themselves, but upon their submission and apology, he was at last pacified. To gratify the people, he did not interfere with their beating to death any that fell into their hands of Nero's party. Amongst others, Spiclus the gladiator was killed in the forum by being thrown under Nero's statues, which they dragged about the place over his body. Aponius, one of those who had been concerned in accusations, they knocked to the ground and drove carts loaded with stones over him, and many others they tore in pieces, some of them no way guilty, insomuch that Mariscus, a person of great account and character, told the Senate that he feared in short time they might wish for Nero again. Nymphidius, now advancing towards the consummation of his hopes, did not refuse to let it be said that he was the son of Caius Caesar, Tiberius's successor, who it is told was well acquainted with his mother in his early youth, a woman indeed handsome enough, the offspring of Callistus, one of Caesar's freedmen, and a certain sempstress. But it is plain that Caius's familiarity with his mother was of too late date to give him any pretensions, and it was suspected he might, if he pleased, claim a father in Martianus the gladiator, whom his mother Nymphidia took a passion for, being a famous man in his way, whom also he much more resembled. Now, thus we see the problem, and it's still a problem nowadays because I think it's less common now for people to know who the father is. Well, I mean, usually they know who the father is, but you know what I mean. It's more common to not know. even with our genetic testing, because we can only test so many people and all that. However, though, he certainly owned Nymphedia for his mother. He ascribed, meantime, the downfall of Nero to himself alone, and thought he was not sufficiently rewarded with the honors and riches he enjoyed. Nay, though to all he was added the company of Sporus, whom he immediately sent for, while Nero's body was yet burning on the pile, and treated as his consort with the name of Pompaa. Okay. But he must also aspire to the empire. And at Rome, he had friends who took measures for him, secretly as well as some women, and some members of the Senate also, who worked underhand to assist him, and into Spain he dispatched one of his friends named Gallienus to view the posture of the affairs. But all things succeeded well with Galba after Nero's death, only Virginius Rufus, still standing doubtful, gave him some anxiety lest he should listen to the suggestions of some who encouraged him to take the government upon him, having at present, besides the command of a large and warlike army, the new honors of the defeat of Vindex and the subjugation of one considerable part of the Roman Empire, namely the entire Gaul, which has seemed shaking about the verge of open revolt, nor had any man indeed a greater name and reputation than Virginius, who had taken a part of so much consequence in the deliverance of the empire at once from a cruel tyranny and a Gallic war. But he, standing to his first resolves, reserved to the Senate the power of electing an emperor. Yet, when it was now manifest that Nero was dead, the soldiers pressed him hard to it, and one of the tribunes, entering his tent with his drawn sword, bade him either take the government or that. But after Fabius Valens, having the command of one legion, had first sworn fealty to Galba, and letters from Rome came with tidings to the resolves of the Senate, at last, with much ado, he persuaded the army to declare Galba emperor. And when Flaccus Hardianius came by Galba's commission as his successor, he handed over to him his forces, and went himself to meet Galba on his way, and having met him, turned back to attend him, in all which no apparent displeasure, nor yet honor was shown him. Galba's feelings of respect for him prevented the former. The latter was checked by the envy of his friends, and particularly of Titus Vinius, who, acting in the desire of hindering Virginius's promotion, unwittingly aided his happy genius in rescuing him from those hazards and hardships which other commanders were involved in, and securing him the safe enjoyment of a quiet life and peaceable old age. And one thing we see, like now, is obviously the case. It's far, because it's unheard of. You will be a leader in the government, or we'll kill you. It's just the other way around. You won't, or you'll do what we say. You won't really be a leader, but you'll keep your position. So near Narbo, a city in Gaul, a deputation of the Senate met Galba, and after they had delivered their compliments, begged him to make what haste he could to appear to the people that impatiently expected him. He discoursed with them courteously and unassumingly, and in this entertainment, though Nymphidius had sent him royal furniture and attendants of Nero's, he put all aside and made use of nothing but his own, for which he was well spoken of as one who had a great mind and was superior to little vanities. But in a short time, Vinius, by declaring to him that these noble and unpompous citizen-like ways were a mere affection of popularity and a petty bashfulness at assuming his proper greatness, induced him to make use of Nero's supplies, and in his entertainments not to be afraid of a regal sumptuosity, and in more than one way the old man let it gradually appear that he had put himself under Venius's disposal. Venius was a person of excessive covetousness, and not quite free from blame in respect to women, for being a young man newly entered into the service under Calvisius Sabinus. Upon his first campaign, he brought his commander's wife, a licentious woman, in a soldier's dress, by night into the camp, and was found with her in the very general's quarters, the Principia, as the Romans call them, for which insolence Caius Caesar cast him into prison. And even in my country, you hear of individuals being killed because they've had an affair with their superior officer's wife or husband sometimes nowadays, but from whence he was fortunately delivered by Caius's death. Afterwards, being invited by Claudius Caesar to supper, he privately conveyed away a silver cup, which Caesar, hearing of, invited him again the next day, and gave order to his servants to set before him no silver plate, but only earthenware. And this offense, through the comic mildness of Caesar's reprimand, was treated rather as a subject of jest than as a crime. But the acts to which now, when Galba was in his hands and in his power was so extensive, his covetous temper led him, were the causes in part, and in part the provocation, of tragical and fatal mischiefs. Nymphidius being become very uneasy upon the return out of Spain of Gallienus, whom he had sent to pry into Galba's actions, understanding that Cornelius Laco was appointed commander of the court guards, and that Venius was the great favorite, and that Gallienus had not been able so much as to come nigh, much less have any opportunity to offer any words in private, so narrowly had he been watched and observed. Nymphidius therefore called together the officers of the troops, and declared to them that Galba of himself was a good, well-meaning old man, but did not act by his own counsel, and was ill guarded by Venius and Laco, and least before they were aware they should engross the authority of Ticlenius had with the troops, he proposed to them to send deputies from the camp, acquainting to him that if he pleased to remove only these two from his counsel and presence, he would be much more welcome to all at his arrival. Whereupon he saw that he did not prevail. It seemed absurd and unmannerly to give roles to an old commander, but friends to retain or displace, as if he had been a youth, newly taking the reins of authority into his hands. Adopting another course, he wrote himself to Galba letters in alarming terms, one while as if the city were unsettled and had not yet recovered its tranquillity. Then that Claudius Macer withheld the corn ships, grain transportation, from Africa, because they didn't have corn in Africa, but they had wheat and stuff. That the legions in Germany began to be mutinous, and that he heard the like of those in Syria and Judea. But Galba, not minding him much, or giving credit to his stories, he resolved to make his attempt beforehand, though Claudius Celsus, a native of Antioch, a person of sense, and friendly and faithful to Nymphidius, told him he was wrong, saying he did not believe one single street in Rome would ever give him the title of Caesar. Nevertheless, many also derided Galba, amongst the rest Mithridates of Pontus, saying that as soon as this wrinkled, bald-headed man should be seen publicly at Rome, they would think it an utter disgrace even to have had such a Caesar. At last it was resolved about midnight to bring Nymphidius into the camp and declare him emperor. Antonius Honoratus, who was first among the tribunes, summoning together in the evening those under his command, charged himself and them severely with their many and unreasonable terms and alterations, made without any purpose or regard to merit, simply as if some evil genius hurried them from one reason to another. What though Nero's miscarriages, said he, gave some color to your former acts? Can you say you have any plea for betraying Galba in the death of a mother, the blood of a wife, or the degradation of the imperial power upon the stage and amongst players? Neither did we desert Nero for all this until Nymphidius had persuaded us that he had first left us and fled into Egypt. Shall we therefore send Galba after to appease Nero's shade, and for the sake of making the son of Nymphidia emperor take off one of Livia's family, as we have already the son of Agrippina? Rather, doing justice on him, let us revenge Nero's death, and show ourselves true and faithful by preserving Galba. Now, revenge, of course, should be limited to the guilty party, not their family or something like that. That's messed up in the head, right? The tribune, having ended his harangue, the soldiers assented and encouraged all they met with to persist in their fidelity to the emperor, and indeed brought over the greatest part. But presently hearing a great shout, Nymphidius, imagining, as some say, that the soldiers called for him are hastening to be in time to check any opposition and gain the doubtful, came on with many lights, carrying in his hand a speech in writing made by Cinganius Varro, which he had got by heart, to deliver to the soldiers. But seeing the gates of the camp shut up and large numbers standing armed about the walls, he began to be afraid. Yet drawing nearer, he demanded what they meant, and by whose orders they were then in arms. But hearing a general acclamation, all with one consent crying out that Galba was their emperor, advancing towards them, he joined in the cry, and likewise commanded those that followed him to do the same. The guard, notwithstanding, permitted him to enter the camp, only with a few, where he was presently struck with a dart, which Septimius, being before him, received on his shield. Others, however, assaulted him with their naked swords, and on his flying pursued him into a soldier's cabin, where they slew him, and dragging his body thence, they placed a railing about it, and exposed it the next day to public view. When Galba heard of the end which Nymphidius had thus come to, he commanded that all his confederates, who had not at once killed themselves, should immediately be dispatched, amongst whom were Cinganius, who made his oration, and Mithridates, formerly mentioned. Yeah, this sense of honor or dread or whatever, this kill themselves first, and then, don't even wait to see what could be your, it's the cultures of the world, right? It was, however, regarded as arbitrary and illegal, and though it might be just, yet by no means popular, to take off men of their rank and equality without a hearing, for every one expected another scheme of government, being deceived, as is usual, by the first plausible pretenses, and the death of Petronius Turpilianus, who was a consular dignity and had remained faithful to Nero, was yet more keenly resented. Indeed, the taking off of Macer in Africa by Trebonius, and Fonteius by Valens in Germany, had a fair pretense, they being dreaded as armed commanders, having their soldiers at their bidding. But why refuse Turpilianus, an old man and unarmed, permission to try to clear himself? Yeah, always let the accused have a chance to defend themselves. Well, I mean, when they're being tried. if any part of the moderation and equity at first promised were really to come to a performance, such were the comments to which these actions exposed him. When he came within 25 furlongs or thereabouts of the city, he happened to light on a disorderly rabble of the seamen, who beset him as he passed. These were they whom Nero made soldiers, forming them into a legion. They so rudely crowded to have their commission conformed that they did not let Galba either be seen or heard by those that had come out to meet their new emperor, but tumultuously pressed on with loud shouts to have colors to their legion, and quarters assigned them. Galba put them off until another time, which they interpreted as a denial, grew more insolent and mutinous, following and crying out, some with their drawn swords in their hands, upon seeing which Galba commanded the horse to ride over them, when they were soon routed, not a man standing his ground, and many of them were slain, both there and in the pursuit, an ill omen that Galba should make his first entry through so much blood and among dead bodies, and now he was looked upon with terror and alarm by any one who had entertained contempt of him at the sight of his age and apparent infirmities. Now, the colors that I fly: green, black, white, and I guess on the side red or some other color. Any other flag is secondary, really. But when he desired presently to let it appear what a change would be made from Nero's profuseness and sumptuosity in giving presents, he much missed his aim, and fell so short of magnificence that he scarcely came within the limits of decency. When Canis, who was a famous musician, played at supper for him, he expressed his approbation, and bade the bag he brought to him, and taking a few gold pieces, put them in with his remark that it was out of his own purse, and not on the public account. He ordered the largesse which Nero had made to actors and wrestlers and such like to be strictly required again, allowing only the 10th part to be retained, though it turned to very small account, most of the persons expending their daily income as fast as they received it, being rude, improvident livers, upon which they had further inquiry made as to those who had bought or received from them, and called upon these people to refund. The trouble was infinite, the exactions being prosecuted far, touching a great number of persons, bringing disrepute on Galba, and general hatred on Venius, who made the emperor appear base-hearted and mean to the world, whilst he himself was spending profusely, taking whatever he could get, and selling to any buyer. Now, it is, as much as we should correct the government when it's wrong, it's important not to overstate that, and you want what's good for your country, and that's how you regard the image that you put forth of it, and it and its leaders too. But Hesiod tells us to drink without stinting of the end and the beginning of the cask, and Venius, seeing his patron old and decaying, made the most of what he considered to be at once the first of his fortune and the last of it.